Burn Branches podcast.
This is something special.
With me in the studio today, as always, are
Christian.
Or Kenneth.
and today we've got
Marcez, a.k.a. Kezo.
AKA. Now I feel like since he did the AKA, we all have to do an AKA.
Go ahead, dude.
Anyways, Kenneth, AKA Lay Low.
Laylo. You've
Okay.
got like 5 nicknames,
I like
bro.
that.
I'm telling you, bro.
I like
Pulling
that.
up on you.
We've been talking a little bit about knowing your season, been talking a little bit about, where your fire's at. We've been talking a little bit about feeding your fire and understanding the kairos and the chronos of time and understanding, where we're at, agriculturally, we're not as a society, but as individuals, whether it's a time of planting and whether it's a time of harvest, whether it's a time of reaping or sowing. And kind of zooming in on that a little bit. When you are in the month of spring, there's this refreshing that happens. You're coming out of a winter, and the winter was cold, the winter was dark, sometimes scary, sometimes it's depressing, Man, you want to talk about seasonal depression, you want to talk about like the things that set in, and you're like, man.
The allergies, bro.
Oh, man. And but then when that transition happens and the spring begins to spring and you see the vivid greens and you see the reds and the blues and all the birds flying around, and there's this shift that happens, right? But it's like there has to be a winter every year, right? There has to be. It's just part of the cycle of how things are built. Unless you live in Hawaii, in which case, you know what? God bless you. I wish I was there. But
We outside.
Sure are.
one day, bro. One day I'm going to be in Hawaii and I'm going to listen to this podcast in remembrance. But you notice that shift in season, and you notice there's like a whole shift in your attitude and your demeanor. Once you recognize the spring has sprung, there's like an expectation like, oh, it's not winter anymore. It's springtime. I get to go outside. I get to go to the park. I get to plant my garden. I get to play with my kids or whatever the case may be. And it's interesting, the mentality shift, right?
It's almost like you get to dream again, if you could truly think about it. Because in the winter, you feel like you get out of your car and then you go right into your house. You come right out of your house with your jacket and all your what are the gadgets to protect your head from getting too cold. You get in your car, you got to shovel all the snow off your car, and it's just so dreadful. But then winter passes and spring comes forth. And there's this shift in energy, and you think to yourself, I think I can dream again. You feel like, oh my God, I'm going to do all this summer. I'm going to start cutting the grass. I'm going to start cutting the grass. I want to go to Michigan for this vacation.
Bro, let me tell you, the first time you cut your grass in the year is the best time. You have such a good time doing it. You're like, oh yeah, this grass, you smell it, and you're like, man, 17 lawnmowers, and you're not feeling that anymore. What happens, bro?
It's crazy. But absolutely, though, David, there's the shift in mentality, and it has everything to do with the stimuli that the environment brings and how our subconscious responds to it. And in our subconscious responding to it, our body is almost cast into action. We can imagine again, right? We can start dreaming again. We can think about all what we're going to put in our backyard. We're going to reset the summer of the backyard. We're going to reset it again. We're going to plant some flowers. We're going to repave the pavement. We start dreaming again because the season starts to shift. But what happens is, a lot of times we forget to maximize those seasons when they come around. We forgot to think about what we need to do when this season comes around, because we're just so stuck in the mentality of thinking winter is never going to go away. Because then, if you live in Chicago, you understand the bipolar nature of the weather. At 9 o'clock it's 8 degrees. At 6 p.m. it's 40 degrees. It's just not consistent. Most of the time when we're stuck in the winter, we end up thinking that winter is never going to go away. But then spring comes forth, and this just burst of dreaming, this burst of imagination that comes forth. And it's a phenomenal idea to think about.
It's funny when you said that. I was like, man, bipolar, emphasis on the polar. You really feel it too. Like there's a shift in the environment around, there's a shift in people. There's a shift in the people that you're walking around, and just everybody's mood's just up, And then it's just like the nature of it. I love it. And if we really look at what that means in our lives, like, so we understand in Ecclesiastes, he talks about the change of season. There's a time for everything.
That's right.
And so we're looking at that, right? So how do we go about recognizing those times, those changes of seasons? How do we recognize like what we're supposed to be doing in them?
And I think even to add on to that, sometimes you can get stuck in that mindset of like, winter's never going to end. But then you also have when the season that you're expecting to last forever comes sooner than you think. And then you're caught in a moment where you're off guard. You're not ready to transition.
Wow.
What that was like, so I like to be in my garden. And, even this year, spring came almost a month early. Like no really gardeners were expecting it. And so there are all these things that they expected to bloom 2, 3, a month or so later, they're happening now. And they don't know what to do, and so they're trying to compensate, and then they're trying to see how this spring is going to affect the summer, how that summer is going to affect the fall, and so you have that ripple effect of how we're going to move forward from there.
It's crazy. Truly, though, if you really consider the entirety of it and how God establishes this entire phenomena, it's like for the past 6 billion or how long the earth has been, this season has been established by God, and it hasn't changed. And obviously, if we look at Genesis 1:14, we think about how God said, "Let there be the light to the firmament of the heaven to divide the days from the night, and let there be the signs." And let there be for signs and the seasons, right? God establishes time from the very onset of creation, and as lights form in the firmament, God uses that to depict the season. And as God establishes that, most of the time in the Bible, He doesn't deviate from that, and it's insane that we get to be graced to have the discernment of understanding what seasons we're in. Sometimes we're not just very sensitive about it at all, and then we miss every single season, and then we keep recycling time.
What's interesting, I just caught something that those stars, the firmament, the astrological nature of how everything is for the sign for the seasons. So it's like it's interesting too. It's like, why do you need a sign for the seasons? That's the first thought. It's like, well, you'd think you'd know when you're in there, but you need a sign to tell you, oh no, this is the transition period. You might miss it, You might think it's not spring yet, but the buds are there. You just didn't know that they were there, but there's something that's a sign that's pointing you to it.
It is absolutely insane, because I think back to it, and I think to myself, how many times have I missed my Kairos moment, right? How many times have I missed the crescendo of time for me? How many times because of my lack of discernment, because of my lack of discernment of the time? And so it's so important that every single day, as the ticking of the time, we understand that everything leads to a crescendo. Everything leads to a point where everything truly matters. And when it matters, we have to be able to take advantage of it when it truly matters.
I think that's part of the call of man, or the call to adventure, whatever you have, is in her learning how to make the most. I heard Jordan Peterson say something. I was listening to him the other day, and he said it's all about being a lot of things in life are about being in the right place at the right time. And it's all about learning to maximize so that you're in the right place at the right time as much as possible, right? Like that's a thing you can concentrate on and get better at, is timing, right? Learning to be at those places. How many people do we know, or how many times in your life you've been like, man, I was in the right place at the right time with the right person? But it's like there's things that led you there, Like there's no such thing as luck. Some of it was the divine nature of God. In fact, that's most of it, right? Is his will and his plan putting you there. Yeah. But then when you consider, it's like there were things that you did that brought you to that point too. Like, what are those things? And like learning how to zoom in on those things. How do I recognize the movements and the patterns in my life that are putting me in the right places at the right time, right? How do I actually expand on that? How do I know where my field is to plant, Like, you think that's a simple thing, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you don't know where your field is. You got to go, hey, what if you don't have a field? You got to go buy it. And you have to go buy a field. How do you know which is the right one, right? So you got to learn all these principles and these things.
Oh, no, that reminds me of something. I was having a phone call with my sister the other day. And I was talking about work and about sort of my struggles in finding work and how that whole process came about, and, going from job to job to not being able to work to working part-time. And, she sort of brought up an idea where, so I do photography on the side, and I've had the opportunity to do some jobs, to be fairly successful at it, and I do it when I can. And she just mentioned how I have a lot of photography equipment at home. And that, I, with a little bit of work, a little bit of elbow grease, I could probably set up a home studio if I really wanted to. And it wasn't really until that moment that I considered those things that I already had. I considered those things that I already possessed, but I just wasn't aware of. I had all the puzzle pieces. They just weren't fitting together in my brain. And it wasn't until she said that, I have everything I need. I'm in the season that I can be at to do the things that I want to do. All I have to do is look around. All I have to do is open my eyes and see what's there.
You have everything you need. And the thought that comes to my mind is Noah and the process of building the ark, right? God comes to Noah with an extreme amount of detail, down to the cubic meters, like how long this should be, the type of wood Noah needs to be. God gives Noah every single dimensions of it. But what happens? Noah had to build it through obedience. And so God gives us the necessary tools. God gives us, every single one of us, our gifts. And those gifts is what's going to happen. Those gifts are what we need to realize and use those tools that God has given us to build the thing that He wants us to build through obedience. So that was good, bro. You realizing that you had all the equipment, and it's just up to you to start building up that photography studio. That's just good stuff, bro. It's fire.
I want to kind of talk about understanding like what you have. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. What you have and how to make use of it. And you had actually said something before we started recording, Marcez, about an adventure that you had going to this park. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Excuse me. It was interesting. It was a hike I went to. I was invited by my cousin, and we're both on our journey as Christians, as followers of Christ, and a friend of his and also a friend of mine invited us to this thing, and it was interesting. It was just a hike for men, just to come together, kind of like one of those, nowadays is like the safe spaces and whatnot to just kind of let loose and also just support one another, or just be there for one another, for just kind of like almost develop like a brotherhood. So it was very interesting. I went there with kind of an open mind, and I had a feeling that it wasn't like necessarily like a Christian event, but one of the questions that they asked, like, because they gave us journals, and when we started, the first question they asked was, "Who am I?" And a lot of brothers, I think I was like the last person to say something. I always like to let everybody go ahead of me. So it's interesting to see everybody's answer. And a lot of people answered with like their job description, and
Wow.
that was like the main thing. And one of the brothers that caught my eyes when he said so boldly, like, and it just reminded me of myself, he was like, "I don't know who I am. I don't know how to answer that."
Wow.
And I was like, he's the one with the fire right there. Like, it just stood out to me. And so I talked to him afterwards. Like, well, when it came to my turn to answering, I was like, I can't wait to answer this, because I used to be like him. I used to be like, I didn't know how to answer that. But now my answer is so bold, it's so simple, and I know my calling. And so my answer was, I'm a child of the Good Shepherd, the Most High God in heaven, Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And that's just like how I wrote it. And so it was amazing to kind of share that, Wow. And it was brothers from all walks of life, from all different cultures, and it was it was amazing. So we were all there for one another, and it was just good experience just to,
Have that kind of a bond, that kind of a moment among men. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like if I could share some light, because I'm like, I know the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah.
I don't mean to say I know everything, but that's if I know one thing,
Very far from that.
that's it.
Yeah.
I'm standing on it.
It's interesting, though, if I'm being honest. It's interesting to consider the fact that every time you ask someone, what do you do? Or who are you? The first thing they acclimatize themselves to is your status in society. Like, say, when you talked about who I am, people are thinking about, oh, I'm a doctor, so-and-so, I'm a nurse, or I'm an architect, I'm a photographer. Those are the things that people acclimatize themselves to.
Right.
But when you truly look at the microcosm of it, you understand that who you are has nothing to do with your job. It has nothing to do with what your purpose is. And so I think when you felt giddy, when the other person was like, I don't know who I am, and you're like, oh, that's it. That's the guy right there. Because God can work with that, because he understands that as much as I feel like I'm nothing, there's an avenue that God loves to explore in that aspect. And then he makes you everything because of him. It's a phenomenal aspect.
I think that's been the biggest shift in my life when I really started to follow God. In real, I really started following him was a sense of identity, because it's just like you say, everyone wants to talk about their job. Everyone wants to talk about their status. But hey, who are you though? Like, are you just your job? Are you the car that you own? Are you the house? Are you the neighborhood you live in? Are you any of these things? It's like, no, you stay there. That's where you're inhabiting right now. How many people that I know, I've heard of, I don't know any millionaires, but how many millionaires that I've heard of, it's like, where did they come from? Some of them middle-class families, some of them were poor, some of them were rich, but they passed through those areas and then they're passing through being a millionaire. Mm-hmm. And how many people win the lottery and they don't have the correct mentality of how to handle any of those things. They lose it all immediately. Why? Well, because their identity or their ability, their abilities are influenced by who they are, and therefore their abilities are going to dictate what they do with those resources. And so it's like, it's backwards. People have this idea of like, if I have all this money, then all my problems are going to be solved. Well, yeah, you might solve some of them for a moment, but then you're going to have more problems afterward. And but there's this core centerpiece of like, well, I know who I am, no matter what happens, no matter where I live. Like, I went through a major crisis of identity in my 20s, where it's just like I lived in different places. I was around different people, completely different areas, and just trying to figure out like, who am I to any of this? I wore 20 different faces, just trying to fit in with wherever I was. And it's like, when I finally got that and God said, this is who I made you to be. This is who I want you to be. This is the David that I'm looking at. I'm waiting for you to step into that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a different thing. And when you learn to walk in that, when you meet God and God shows you that mirror of, you get a glimpse of it. Like, this is who you are, and this is who I want you to be, and this is who I am. And then he bridges that gap for you. It's like there's a weight that's lifted off your shoulders. There is a dance that comes in your step. There is a praise just comes pouring out, It really does. There's a song, praise is pouring out, right? The reason that song exists is because we all feel it, right? Is because when you realize, like, I don't have to worry about any of these other things because I've got what matters, right? And that's the greatest gift I was ever given. That's the greatest gift. And man, when you're walking in your season and you recognize somebody that's needing that gift, like, who am I? And you have that, and you're like, oh man, I can give this to you. Here's what I got. Here's what I received. You could receive the same thing. That's more precious than gold, man. Like, this man didn't even have to find out where his field was. He just started walking, and there it was. He could plant the seed, and that's admirable, right? Knowing and recognizing that season of life that you're in, and being able to just go ahead and do the thing you need to do. You know how many times I've struggled, and I'm just like, man, should I say anything to this person? I don't want to say anything to this person. Like, oh, should I even do such a little thing as like, oh, let me invite you to church. It's like inviting somebody to church is nothing. Like, they can just tell you no and you can go about your way. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But you start to get nervous and you're like, oh man, I'm so scared if they say no. What if they say no? If I invite them to church, it's like, well, so what if they do? Like,
right.
Big deal.
Yeah.
But and this man, you're able to just focus and you're just like, I'm in my season. Here we go. Boom. Let me plant something. I think understanding, the different areas of our life, and the season that we're in begins to reflect on all those areas, right? Like, Marcez, you're a father, right? And understanding, like, well, what are the things you want to grow out of your children, right? What are the things you want to plant there,
Yeah.
And like, I got to look and be like, oh, what are the things I want out of my relationship? What are the things I want to plant there?
Right.
Or you might say, oh, what are the things I want out of my career? What are the things I want to plant there? And you look at the season that you've been given, like, you say, oh, hey, I had all this equipment to build this studio. What do I want to plant there? And there's this excitement with spring, right? There's this excitement. And I think you had mentioned something last time about having a fire, right? And about recognizing that fire, and about, I think we talked a little bit about
like what to do with it, kind of. You get it sometimes.
How to get that fire burning more, right?
Yeah, and how to get it burning more, and then how to use that, and what to use it for, to keep, because what you use it for helps it keep going. Whether if it's ministering to people in different ways, it might be, me, I have my eyes set on music and different ways of kind of just like available, making myself available for figuring out the different things I can use as to
as tools.
yeah, as tools. And it makes me think about, like, I recently was gifted a bunch of hundreds of dollars of books, like that someone I came across, a brother. We started talking
Hook
about God.
me up, bro.
We started talking about God, and then we just went from there. Next thing you know, this brother, his part of his ministry, his name is Orlando. Part of his ministry is what he does on the side is he just has books, and he just gives them to people. Once he starts talking about God, and then he sees what's going on in people's lives, that's his way of,
That's the
his
way of
good
ministry.
deed. And so, man, I have those tools. I have to. He gifted my daughter a book. He gifted my sons, and I'm about to use that and start a Bible study at home. And a lot of times I was kind of hesitant because I'm still learning. Like, I'm still fresh, still new. But, I know that God has a plan for me. And, we can learn together.
Definitely.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Definitely. I've come to an understanding that, right? Every person, every man or woman, right? We have this. We have a specific time allocated to us as specific seasons. It's like there's an early time. I think maybe we can call it the morning time, right? And the morning times of our life. And the morning times are the times where you can make mistakes, and they're typically the repercussions that comes out of it are repercussions that are bearable or something that manageable in a sense. But that's like, I like to think the first 20 years of your life, once you hit the 18, once you hit the 20, 21s, 22s, 23s, 24s, 25s, you know that these are the seasons where you can make mistakes, and hopefully they're not damaging mistakes where you can't reset from. But once you move past that, every single chronos of it, every single passing time is something that you need to maximize because you're moving to a different season of your life. Most of the time, people don't recognize that. I think half of the time, the fact that we don't understand what seasons we're in, we don't know how to maximize those seasons and the things that we need to do in those seasons to put us forward. And like we alluded to, there's an aspect of there's a chronos aspect of things, and there's a kairos aspect of things, and chronos is the quantitative aspect of time, right? As the second moves and the minute moves, and as the minute time moves, the hour hand starts to move, and then the day goes, and the month goes, and the years go, and as that goes, we know that that's the equalizer. Every single person has that. Everyone has 24 hours within the day, but the kairos aspect is something that not everyone gets, but everyone is portioned a level of grace in those aspects. And so now what happens is if we don't maximize our kairos moment in these seasons, we miss out on a lot, and we just keep recycling time in a lot of things.
That kind of reminds me of when Jesus is at the wedding of Cana, and his mom's like, "Hey, they ran out of wine," and he said, "Woman, my time is not yet come."
Come on.
He understood that the climax of his miracles and all these works that he was supposed to be doing, it wasn't quite ready yet. And so he recognized he was not in that season. And that's almost just as important as recognizing, like, hey, this is not the season for these things. Like,
where do you find Jesus at the age of 12?
Yeah.
With the Pharisees, chopping it up with the Pharisees. And his mother comes around, and his mother's like, "What you doing, bro?" It's like, "I'm going about my father's business, man." At the age of 12.
Right. Well, that's interesting too, because that's like you can take that and you can compare that. And this is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, and I love the way that TV show The Chosen did it justice, and where Jesus finds the woman at the well. You always love talking about the woman at the well.
I love that concept.
And then he gets done talking with her, and then his disciples come up, and they're like, "Hey, isn't it time for lunch? We should go get something to eat."
Right.
And he said, "Well, I'm just going to read it." He says, "Jesus said unto them, My meat is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work." And what they said, "Oh, eat, master, eat." He says, I have meat to eat that ye know not of. Man. And they're like, "Who gave him food? Who fed this man? Did you give him lunch?"
He said, "I got that sirloin steak, bro." What you talking about?
He said, "My meat is to do the will of my Father."
That's right.
And it's he understood the season that he was in then, right? And he understood, even as a child, he was going about that will, but now he was in a new season.
I also love to think that Jesus at 12 years old, we get a little bit of a record as to what happens when he was 12, but then nothing happens, and then he's 30 years now. Fast forward,
a lot of things happen. We just don't know what
we
they are.
just don't know what they are. But I would love to think that there was a preparation aspect as to what Jesus Christ was doing, possibly learning his father's trade, possibly putting a few things together, like learning, like learning how to talk, like how to be a man or whatever the cost is. Then 30 years comes in, and it takes him 3.5 years to accomplish the task that God has given to him. He takes this time period to maximize every single chronos aspect of his life. Now the kairos aspect of time, he maximizes it, and it's like, okay, we technically do have a record, right, of what Jesus Christ was possibly doing. We just possibly don't have a record of it, but we know that he was doing
the details.
We don't have the details of it, but we know that he was doing something, and I know that there's a preparation aspect that comes with that. Now he shows up on the scene at the age of 30, and it takes him 3.5 years just to do whatever his will was.
And then I think about that, and it's like, imagine, what would it take for you to do in 30 years so that you change the world for the next 2,000? What could you possibly do in 33 years that could change the world for the next 2,000 years?
Wow. Dude, no man on earth has been able to replicate the influence that Jesus Christ has.
Right. I don't even care if you believe in him or not. Even if you don't believe in him, you have to stand back and recognize the change that he made to the entire world.
Dude, it's insane to think about it. The amount of books that he has influenced to be published that people don't give him credit to.
All of them.
All of
All of them. Literally all of them. He has changed the mindset of all of humanity from the time that he was on this earth to now, to where it's influenced. Even people who don't know who he is are still influenced by it.
Isn't it crazy? It's like all of a sudden I have a great idea. And the great idea is if you plant something and you water it and it grows, right, it's gonna bear fruit. And people are just taking credit for it. I'm like, you sure? I'm like, that's not a good idea. There's nothing new under the sun, right? That someone said. You think that's a new idea? Stop it. Give Jesus the credit. And it blows my mind sometimes. I'm like, these are not new concepts. Like, these are concepts that God is like, these are principles that Jesus Christ laid down.
I'm always looking at certain people that I know, like, because I've been on my journey, you know what I'm saying? And I would see little things people do. I'm like, little do you know, like, Jesus, God has his hand all in that. Like, that's
Little did you know. Little did you know.
But yeah, it's just amazing.
It is pretty amazing when you step back and you actually see how God has orchestrated all of the underlying and underpinning, like, metaphysics in our world, to where, it really is mind-boggling. And sometimes you look at that, and I've had this question sometimes. It's like, well, why if God has influenced the world in this way, why were there so many bad things, and why were so many bad things done in His name? And that's a challenging thought. And then I remember how Satan works, right? And then I'm like, Satan can't make anything new. He doesn't. He does not have the ability to. He does not have the ability to speak things into existence, but God does. So what he does is he takes what God speaks into existence and he tries to take away parts of it or manipulate it and turn it into something that serves him, right? And you see that all throughout. And so, like, I look at history and I'm like, I look at all the slow perversions and the twistings of God's word that have happened to cause so much suffering on so many people, and I'm like, I see the hand of Satan all in that, right? And may mercy be on the souls of those who perpetrated that. But you see how God changes the metaphysics, and Satan always tries to steal, right? He always tries to take what God is trying to do perfectly. And God doesn't really care too much. He's like, well, not that he doesn't care, but it's just like, you know what? I'm gonna let Satan have his season because I know what I'm doing right now, and I'm gonna know the greatest good that is gonna shine out of this, and Satan can't even stop that. He can't even stop it. Satan threw Jesus on a cross. Not maybe not physically, but he influenced the minds of the people who did that.
Right.
And he thought, I've won. And then by putting him on the cross, we now have eternal life.
Right.
Now who's laughing?
Little did he know. Little did he know. Little did he know.
I want to talk a little bit about that, about the idea of, using that fire in that season and focusing on that Kairos moment and the energy that it takes. The conversion of energy into action, right? Because that's the hard part. That's where we stand, right?
That's right.
God has the one with the will, right? We match our wills to His. We have a vision. We try to match our vision to God's. We do the best we can.
Right.
God gives us a vision. He plants things in us. God makes the season, we exist within the season, but then the conversion of the energy into action.
We've expounded on it in terms of the identity aspect. I think a lack of an understanding of what we are or what our true core, our true identity is, always leads to our inability to recognize the potential that we have. And so we don't recognize the potential that we have because, like Marcez alluded to, because we don't know who we are. There is a fight for our identity. I mean, obviously, we don't have to go too deep into this to even know what the fight is in this day and age. Our identity has been fought because if we don't realize what our identity is, we will not know what our true potential is. And if we don't know our true potential, we will not have the force, the fire, the energy enough to convert that potential energy into possibly different forms of energy, into kinetic. And if we transfer the potential energy to kinetic can be what? Electrical energy. It could be different forms of energy. And so a lack of an understanding of who we are always hinders our inability to understand what our potential is. And so to further know what our potential is, the question about identity needs to be had. But then to further expound on what converting potential to kinetic energy, we have to know that God has given us the ability. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. He's given us every single gift that we have to potentially move forward in life, but we just need to understand that we have that potential.
I think that's the trick, right? Is moving forward. Because how do you convert potential into kinetic?
Just got to move.
You just got to move, right? Something has to move. So it's like walking. And that's why I think it's so important and impactful when you realize in Psalm 23, and everybody knows this psalm, right? He said, he leadeth me down paths of righteousness. And it's not, righteousness is not the journey. It's the path.
It's the path.
And so by being on that path and being in motion, whether that walk is through the valley of death or not, you're on the path of righteousness, right? And it's that righteousness that's causing that work to be done. And it's really not, it's not hard work. Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden's light. But just by walking on the path of righteousness, you're beginning that conversion process and you're able to do other things. I've always found that if I'm ever struggling, if I'm struggling getting out of bed, if I'm struggling working out, if I'm struggling reading, I just start walking. Just walk a little bit. Right. If I need to think correctly, I just start pacing, right? Because getting in motion, you begin to do things a little bit better. Sometimes you got to stir up the gift that's within you. You got to stir it up.
You have to.
It takes motion.
You have to.
And interesting you said that about engines. And I'm like, sometimes I think, like, you got to also recognize this, like, are you working with an electric engine? You're working with a combustion engine? You're working with oil engine? But they all work the same way. Use fire to convert fuel into output. And that's it. That's literally it. And that's all we do. That's our core understanding. That's why we replicate. That's why we make these machines, because we know it intrinsically inside of us, because we do that. That's why we can make these machines. Wow. That's why we can come up with those ideas. Because, hey, I can take and I can move this mouse. I can do that. That just took energy, right? I can speak words. That's converting mental energy. That's converting air and all these things. And it's like a component. That's why spirit is always conceptualized as breath and fire, because those are two things that your body needs: heat and air. And so with heat and air, what do you got? Got combustion.
You do.
And that's what we are. We're combustion.
Wow. Bars.
Wow.
Mind blown. Nugget. That was good, David. Whew, man. Anyways.
That's like a
That's not the end, guys. Nugget. I promise. But that was good, David.
Yeah, that was
good.
great.
That was profound. That was good.
So what do you think? Like once you've identified. That was so good. Okay, I'll take the compliment. Thank you, Kenny. Once you've identified and you okay, so I'm an engine, right? I'm doing this process. I'm doing my Father's will.
Right.
I'm out there getting my meat. I'm walking down my paths of righteousness. What do you think are the things that you see that pop out to you right away, and you see, oh, this is me. This is God needs me to do this. What's the sign? What's the sign in the season? What's the first thing that speaks to you? That's like this. You recognize it immediately, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna jump on that. What do you think that is? And all the times in your life that's pulled that out of you, and you're like, oh, what do you think that is?
I strongly believe that there's not a specific indicator as to your crescendo moments or your kairos moment. But you come to a realization that this is a time where I have to maximize. I remember when I was put in charge of the social media for our church, right? And I realized I remember thinking to myself that as much as I don't feel this might be a kairos moment, but this is an opportunity that I have to maximize. When we say, okay, just go to you're a Christian, maybe go teach the kids. You have to understand that these are moments where you have to maximize. It's not that final stage. It's like maximizing every single thing that comes your way. And out of maximizing every single thing that comes your way, your Kairos moment is almost brought to fruition. And I understood that the more I start to do the things, the more I realize my purpose. The more I the more I took on more responsibility, the more I started to feel fulfilled. And so in order for me to understand the time that I'm in, I have to be engaged in responsibility. Well, not any kind of responsibility, meaningful responsibility. And I realized the more responsibility I took, the more purpose that I came into realization.
I think there's another point to that too, especially with the teaching the kids. I remember I just had this thought, because I never really imagined myself in children's ministry, or I never even felt comfortable around kids. But I just had this thought, like, I'm getting this lesson together, and for the kid, I'm wondering like how easy it would be to discard this or discount this. They'd be like, oh, it's just another lesson for the kids. Not gonna listen. They're gonna wait for snack, and then they're gonna forget what you tell them 5 minutes later. Bro. And then I was thinking to myself, like, no, like there was, Brother Marcez, that was my youth pastor, and he brought me up, and he showed me the way, taught me the word. And, here I am so many years later, and I'm helping to babysit their kid. And the way that he taught me, the amount of effort that he put into that moment,
right,
into that Chronos moment, and that Kairos moment, and how it influenced me, that's now going to be a reflection of how I influence his kids.
That's true.
And how I influence that next generation. And so it's so easy just to discount some of these moments as less than, but really they're the pinnacle. Because who's to say in 10, 15 years that those are going to be the kids watching my kids?
That is true.
Wow.
That is true.
And so the cycle begins and the season begins.
That is true. That is true.
It's almost like you're preparing for 10 seasons down the road or something. You're not just focused on what's in front of you. You're focused on like the outcome and growing a long-term investment. And in some ways that's way more of a, you talk to Dave Ramsey, long-term investments, they're the way to go, when you're 60 years old, you reap the benefit of that. When you're 60, you're going to be glad you planted that. And then even more so, there's an old proverb where he says, I don't think this is a Solomon proverb. I think it's like a Greek proverb or something. But it says a good society, a wise society is one where old men plant trees that they will never sit in the shade of. And it's like when you actually do something to bring along that next generation, you do something to influence them because it's going to produce fruit, and it's going to produce fruit for them and someone else. Like that is the pinnacle of achievement right there. It's like it might not be the skyscraper in the sky that gets everyone's attention, but you're building something that will last, and you're building 10 skyscrapers because who knows what those kids will do, right?
Well, I also think that the craziest misconception that I could speak only from the lenses of my personal experience growing up, is the fact that I like to think to myself that I had time, but you truly don't. Time is, well, how does Ecclesiastes say? It's like wind in a sense. You can't grasp it, right? It's just passing by. And I realized that as much as I thought to myself that I had time, I blanked my eye and I'm going to be 28. And everything that I procrastinated, anything that I thought to myself, well, when I get to this age, I'm going to do. Well, the age you said you're going to do it at 25. Well, 25 is here, bro. What's up? And so I think that the misconception of that you have time, that's completely wrong. If you have to do something, do it today.
Do it today.
Don't procrastinate.
Because you might not get the chance tomorrow.
You might not. Teach us to number our days, right,
Teach
David?
us to number our days.
Ooh.
You did post a reel on that about teaching us to number our days.
We don't have to plug. We don't have to
That
plug.
was good. That was good.
I liked it too.
That was good.
What do you think about all that, Marcez, about recognizing that season? What is it that pops out to you?
What taught me to kind of take advantage of every moment and every breath was, like, I remember there was if you don't mind me sharing for real quick,
Share as much as you want.
So I was probably in my early 20s chasing my, first girlfriend or whatever. And
it's a girlfriend.
yeah. And so, I grew up with my grandparents, my father's parents, and raised in that home. Long story short, my grandfather, he passed. We were really close. He passed when I was in 8th grade, but by this time, I was in my early 20s when I was on the verge of losing my grandma. We had lost our house, and that was the only place she knew to be home. She was used to being around all of us. And then we ended up losing the house. And I remember she had to go to like a senior citizen home. So she was by herself a lot. And so I'm, running around chasing my girlfriend, and then something hit my heart. It was just like, my grandma, she goes from, all of us in the house being around us and to being more alone, more by herself. And so something really spoke to my heart, and I got a job. I was like recovering from something, like I had lost a job, and then I got a job close to her place intentionally. And then the first day, I was going to spend the night at her house. We were going to watch movies and just hang out, just eat ice cream, just develop a different relationship, because I was, becoming older, becoming a man. And so that night, I go to her house. She's not answering her phone. And I call her neighbor, and she says, your grandmother's in the hospital. So my grandmother that day, she never came back home. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And so it really changed me, because I finally took the moment to do something, I just harnessed on that moment. And, you don't have time. You don't. So it taught me a lot, because I lost. If I would have took the opportunity before that, who knows what could have came from that. But I used to harp on it a lot. It used to hurt me a lot, but it did teach me to take advantage of the moment. So when I think about somebody that I haven't talked to in a while, no matter what the situation is, hey, if I get turned down, or if I invite somebody to Bible study, or I don't know, the worst anything somebody could do is, give me a no or something. But I learned to take advantage of the moment, because I may never get it back. And I've witnessed I've had moments like that. And so, it makes me very appreciative of, each moment, each breath I do have. I remember praying not too long ago. I was saying, God, just let every breath of mine be praise and worship to you. It's that. It feels so good to say that, because I really mean that in my heart. So.
Wow.
But yeah.
Wow, that's I sense that lesson, as hard as it was to learn, sometimes those hard lessons, those valuable lessons, are really difficult to learn. And we kick ourselves for not knowing them before. But I mean, how are we supposed to know until that moment? You're a young man, you don't know these things, and you learn it through those hard times. But I will say, it's sunk in, and you can tell that by everything about you, right? Because I tell you, man, every time you hug me, every time I look forward. I almost look forward every time I'm around you, because I'm like, I'm gonna get a hug from Marcez. It's like when I hug you, it's like time stops for a second, and you're just like, let's just, like, your actions and your body language, you're just like, let's enjoy this moment for a second, and it just bleeds out of you.
Wow.
And
one thing that I took from the story that you shared, or I can call it a testimony in a way, because you took a lot of lesson from it, is how quickly seasons can change.
Yeah.
That's what I took from all of that. And it's like, one moment your dad is here, and another moment your mom is here, but the next moment they're probably not. One day you're healthy, you're going to the gym, you're doing these pull-ups. Another day, you're just, we just found a mass in your liver and it's over. How quickly seasons can change. It's insane. It's like it's uncontrollable in a sense. As much as we would love to be very proactive and take the initiative on these things, and as much as the technological advances and the artificial intelligence, no one has been able to add more time to your life. It's not possible, because seasons change, and that's just how life works. Solomon understood that. He did. That's why he talks about there's a time to do this, there's a time to plant, and there's a time to harvest. The planting and the harvesting is not the point. The point is the time, because it's the monotony of life. Seasons change, man. It's hard, but it's phenomenal that these seasons, they teach us, that fall comes, the leaves are falling, the colors of the trees are changing. And so now your closets has to change. The clothes in your closet has to change. I have to put a jacket on. All right, I have to go to Ross or wherever you shop to go get a jacket, put some winter boots on, possibly get a shovel. And so knowing that these seasons are going to come, the only initiative we can do is to take these small little actions to at least help us through these seasons.
Prepare for them.
That reminds me of a proverb and one that Solomon wrote. And he said, go watch the ants and see how he stores up food for the summer. He says, you want to know how to live well? Watch the ants.
Watch the ant. Dude,
They're preparing for that winter because they know it's going to be there.
literally.
So that everything about them is about storing up. I think about squirrels and how they store nuts in trees. They store a whole winter's worth of nuts, sometimes 3 or 4 winters. Sometimes there are squirrels that forget where they put their nuts. And so they start a new one. And they might end up with 2 or 3 trees full of nuts. And I'm like, that's a lot of nuts.
No, that's nuts.
That is nuts, bro. But it's just, it's insane to know that seasons change so quickly.
They do. That's why you got to recognize when they're coming, and you got to maximize it, right? Because there's good things in the winter too, right?
Yeah.
There's a snowball fight. There's great things in the fall, pumpkin spice lattes.
Loving my
hashtag.
hot cocoa, man. Just talking about crazy though, but it's like one time you have a house, one time you have a grandmother, another time the house is gone. Grandma is sick. It's like we need to cherish these moments before we lose them all.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah, we definitely have to embrace the fullness of life and for what it is, right? We have to look, work for those Kairos moments. And I think this is interestingly talking about this, is like, that's the thing I have against this whole hustle culture mentality of our day and age, right? Because hustle culture, you might think on the surface, it feels good. And look, my personality type is the type A personality type to grab onto that and be like, yeah, work hard. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I pound 2 Red Bulls and I get to work and I get to the gym and I do all
no
this
free
stuff.
advertising for Red Bull.
Yeah, don't drink Red Bull. It will give you a heart attack. Stop that. Drink something nicer. Sponsorship open. And
I hope my cousin hears this.
But you
culture.
get into this hustle culture mindset and you're like, this is how I make money, this is how I maximize my time. But it's like, that's the problem I have with hustle culture, is because it's like I'm maximizing all my time for what? Rate of return on my dollar, or rate of return on my muscles, or rate of return on whatever it is, on knowledge. And it's like, what about maximizing your time with your family? There's a man of God, I listened to him, and all the things he said, the one thing that caught my eye is he says, I lead such a busy life. I schedule my time with my family. And the reason I do that, I schedule them first. And if anything interferes with that time I have scheduled with my family, I say, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy. And I was like, that caught me. And I'm like, that's it. You prioritize those people that you care about so that you can maximize your time with them before you maximize anything else. Wow. And I think that's the thing I think hustle culture kind of forgets about. They're like, oh, who cares about emotions? Who cares about family? Who cares about these things?
Don't you go speak into my heart.
Those are the things that we have to take first, right? Like, if I get a call from the middle of the night and my grandma's on that line, I'm dropping everything. I'm taking that call.
Everything.
Sorry, Grandma, I did not take your last call, but I'm going to call you back after this, I promise. But I found out from my dad she was okay, so no worries.
Love it.
But, you gotta maximize those times. You gotta understand the season of life you are with your family.
Right.
And like, how do I maximize this time? How do I maximize the time with my brothers and my sisters? How do I maximize that time? It's like, that's the thing. Like, recognizing the season that you're in with them, because that's what it's all for. Why do you work? Do you work for the love of work? Some people do. Or do you work to feed your family? Like,
well, yeah, some people also build an identity based on their work, so that's all they know, and it's so hard for most people to break out of it when there's companionship involved, because for a lot of times of your years, you've just been working and hustling, and now there's a wife or there's a man involved, and all you know is work, and you don't know how to devote the time to take care of your husband or your wife.
And then even with that, I feel like a lot of people might start off with that mindset of like, I'm going to work all these hours, to feed my family. But then, that work ends up becoming that escape, and they lose that first love.
Yeah. David talked about a moment in his life where he had 20 masks on, and I had to hold back. There's so much to do with how men max their emotion. They have so many masks, they put on so many masks, and that's definitely a different conversation.
It definitely is. So you'll just have to tune in next time to hear us talk about that and about, whatever it is that Kenny's hinting at here.
That was good.
I'm in. So we want to thank Marcez for joining us today on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure to have you on.
It's been great.
Appreciate you guys.
Find him on social media. He's got wonderful things to share. Might have an album coming out pretty soon, maybe.
Maybe.
Find him at Kezo.
Yeah,
What's your Instagram?
K3Z0.
A3C0.
Yeah.
Give him a follow. He's got good content. He's got good things to say. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at
Burning Branches.
Burning Branches. Burning_branches.
Kenny knows.
Burning_branches. That's it.
That's
And
it.
well, while we're at it, don't forget to follow us on Apple. Just don't forget to leave a review because the reviews definitely help the algorithm as well.
We appreciate a review too because it kind of tells us how we're doing. If we
is
read
true.
a review and you say, "Hey, I like this," I like that makes us feel good. But then if you say, "Hey, I would love to hear more from our guest Marcez. I'd love to have Johnny on again," you can say that in the review, and then it gives us an idea. It gives us something to work with.
Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Spotify. The Burning Branches.
And don't forget to check out our YouTube. That's where all the real action happens at. You can see our shorts and our videos and see the next adventure. Once again, the Burning Branches.
We're out.
Love
Out.
In Jesus' name.
Love it.
All right.